My school never used to have lockdowns. The concept didn't even exist. These days, lockdowns are common. But when I was still in high school, it didn't even occur to us that something like a lockdown could happen. I suppose this was because my school was a private boarding school, and the threat of school shooters was almost non-existent. Before coming on school grounds, everyone was thoroughly searched, and it was impossible to access the campus without passing through the main gate. What was even more impossible? Getting from the main gate to the school unauthorized. A police chopper was merely 5 minutes away, and my principal often boasted that the only place more protected than my school was the White House. And yes, that's why we didn't have a lockdown drill per se. And that's why you will understand the rest of this confusing story. One day, while in math class, our math teacher suddenly got a call. He picked it up, and within a second we saw an expression of raw fear flash across his face. Within seconds, he'd locked the door and commanded us to close all the windows and hide under our tables. At first, we didn't understand what was happening. One of the smartasses in the class asked what was happening, and my teacher snapped, "Now!" He commanded. He was not joking. None of the students were really scared. Of course, I suppose we were shocked, but when it came to things like this, we had a sense of safety that was impossible to remove. "It has to be a drill," one of my classmates said, and everyone groaned in agreement. My school, for some reason, was big on drills. However, this was the first time a drill like this was happening. Since someone had already provided a reasonable answer to our question of why, we got about the business of hiding under our tables, but we were definitely not scared. I kept looking up at the math teacher, though. He looked like he knew something that we didn't know. He looked like he knew this wasn't a drill and that something was up. Of course, it could all be an act, but I never knew Mr. Paul, not his real name, to be the greatest actor. A moment later, we heard booming voices on the loudspeakers. "Attention! A school lockdown is now in effect. Students should be in class with the teacher. The doors should be locked, windows should be closed, and students should take cover. This is not a drill. Attention! A school lockdown is now in effect." Now, this was something that had not happened before. I looked over at my teacher, and he was now biting his nails. I'd known Mr. Paul for 4 whole years, and I'd never seen him as scared as he was that day. After the announcement stopped, it seemed he suddenly remembered that he was supposed to be in charge of a class. He told us to calm down, and that there was probably nothing wrong. We asked if it was a drill, and he said no, it was not. Then someone replied that something was definitely wrong. At that point, he snapped once more and told us to shut up and wait it out. When all this was done, we'll get some answers. That was when we actually noticed the silence. There was no one in the hallways, and we couldn't even hear people from classes sharing a wall with us. It was like we were suddenly alone in the world. If I'd been a bit younger than I was, I probably would have started crying. But my school is an all-boys school, and even though I could see that my classmates were getting scared by the minute, none of them was crying. At that moment, we heard the first gunshot. It was in the hallway, directly outside our door, and I could feel my entire class jump out of their skins in fear. Yes, that includes even Mr. Paul. One boy at the back started reciting the Lord's Prayer. I could feel my bladder releasing. The second gunshot was further away, but we were scared nonetheless. Soon, what sounded to us like a shootout began. It raged on for about 10 minutes before we started hearing choppers. Before long, we heard heavy footsteps on our hallway. A man, armed to the teeth, kicked down our class door and shouted at us. What happened next was like a blur. In seconds, we were in a straight line, and armed policemen were leading us out of the school. The next day, I learned that one of the older students had actually entered the school with a few knockouts. He started setting them off in the middle of the day. The principal, upon hearing what sounded like guns, called teachers and asked them to start lockdown. When he called the police and they told him it would take 15 minutes to reach campus, he went on the loudspeaker to ensure compliance and waited in his office. The errant student was arrested but didn't face charges. I guess his parents were very influential. However, he was expelled and moved to another school. I love sleeping. For some reason, it's the one thing I enjoy more than any other thing, and one day it almost got me into a world of trouble. After a particularly stressful morning, I snuck into the gym to take a nap. It wasn't legal, but it was something I'd done a few times and I'd never been caught. After my nap, my next stop was class. and I already had a ready-made excuse. If asked what I was doing, my answer would be simple. I'd been in the toilet. It was a fail-safe answer that had never failed me. And since my geography teacher was a man and I was a teen, he certainly wouldn't dare ask for more information. Upon getting into the hallway, I met a stunning sight. Bags littered around, and it looked like something of great importance had happened. Lockers were open, and the school was eerily silent. It was like a scene out of a scary movie. As I was thinking of what could possibly be happening, the lights went off. It was daytime, so I could still see, but my school lights never went off except during a lockdown drill. Of course, that made me a bit wary, but I know stranger things have happened. As I inched towards my class, I heard the hallway speaker saying, "Attention all students, we are in full lockdown. This is not a drill. Stay in class, lock the doors, stay away from the windows, and stay under your table." Immediately I started sweating. I was in the hallway during a lockdown? At that moment, I heard footsteps running towards the part of the school where I was. I was scared to my bones. What if it was the school shooter? What would I do then? I took off in the opposite direction. I was definitely not going to face a school shooter. As I was running, I was thinking of the safest place to hide. All of the classes were locked, and it was unlikely that they'd open the doors for me. The basketball court was open and would make a terrible place to hide. I do suppose I could hide under the seats, but the doors to the gym can't be locked, so the shooter would just stroll in. What about the cafeteria? I didn't have the key, so it would be impossible to lock the door to stop the shooter from following me. Just as I was about descending the stairs to the ground floor of the school building, I heard the sound of gunshots. I almost tumbled down the stairs before deciding that going down was a terrible idea. As I turned a corner while running, I ran straight into someone. I started screaming, "Don't shoot! Don't shoot!" before even looking at him. I was curled into a ball and was on the verge of tears. When I looked up, it wasn't the school shooter. It was some guy named Dave, not his real name. He looked scared too. "Hey, shut up, I'm not shooting." "Do you have any idea what's happening?" he asked. "I don't," I replied, extremely relieved that I wasn't about to die. "But I heard some gunshots downstairs," I continued. "Me too," he said. We got up and both ran to a storage facility I'd never thought of. We locked the doors and prayed that the shooter wouldn't find us. After a while, the police arrived and the shooter was caught. Apparently, it was just some kid who wanted to prank the school, although he said he did it because the school wasn't taking security seriously. What about the gunshots, you ask? Well, he said he didn't bring any bullets with his gun to school, so he couldn't have shot even if he wanted to. And true to his words, the gun collected from him didn't have any bullets and didn't look like it had fired any in a long time. Till this day, we don't actually know who shot the gunshots I heard downstairs. Once every year or so, my school has a lockdown drill. It's usually a very exciting affair, and to some extent, my schoolmates came to start expecting it somewhat. And every single time the announcement is made, my principal makes sure to mention that this is not a drill, even though it often clearly is. The previous year, I'd heard some kids whisper that one day the principal would say this is not a drill and would actually mean it. I'd laughed at this joke because I know my schoolmates. While some may actually be weird, we certainly didn't have any sociopaths that would try and shoot up a school. I mean, how much of a loser do you have to be to even attempt that? I was about to find out. That day I was in the toilet when I heard what sounded like a knockout. I thought it was a knockout because the previous week a student had been suspended for throwing knockouts on school property. Apparently he'd done it as a prank to get us scared. But unfortunately, another kid had seen him throwing it and screamed it's a knockout for everyone to hear. After I heard the knockout, I heard the voice of someone screaming, "It's not a knockout," from the hallway. I laughed and proceeded to plug my headphones in. I wanted to watch a video and didn't want someone in the other stall to hear me watching it. After watching my video, I stepped out of the toilet and was immediately tackled to the ground by a security guard. He proceeded to search me and then carried me over his shoulder like I was a rag doll. I was banging on his back, worried and scared. He shouted to me to shut up and told me that there was a shooter in the school. Immediately after I heard that, I became calm. After running to the farthest end of the school, he dropped me. He opened the janitor's closet, threw me in, and locked it from the outside. Afterwards, he ran off. That's the last time I ever saw him. A few gunshots later, I heard maniacal laughter from the hall outside the door. I tried to peep to see who it was, but I couldn't. I was so scared that I couldn't move. I couldn't help thinking of my friends, thinking if they were going to live or die. I kept thinking of whether I was going to go home someday and if it would be possible for me to even see my mom again. I was that scared. He kept laughing as he went down the hallway and came towards my door. Then he stopped. Meeny, miny, mo, who is the next to have a bullet hole? It seemed he couldn't choose the class to go into next. Is it geography or science, or is there someone hiding where the janitor makes himself happy? My brain almost ceased function. It appeared that he knew where I was hiding. I hoped it was a fluke, but what if he knew? I guess we check the janitor's place first. Wouldn't that be for the best? Now that I think of it, the shooter's obsession with rhymes was extremely creepy. But as I crouched in the small closet, I could think of nothing but how much I wasn't interested in death. The footsteps continued, and soon enough, he was at the front of the closet. He tried to open the door, but was unable to. He tried to put his feet through, but it was a metal door, so it didn't budge. He tried again, but it still didn't budge. I could hear him swear as the door frustrated him, but I could feel his rage building. He wasn't about to let this go. Fortunately for me, at the same moment, I heard him get tackled to the ground. There were 2 gunshots, maybe 3, but at the end of the scuffle, I heard an older voice saying, "He's dead. He's gone. Make sure there aren't any others." I remained in the janitor's closet for 3 more hours. By the time I came out, I was almost out of my mind in fear. At the front door of the closet was a smear of blood. A while later, I found out that the shooter was a senior who was dealing with mental issues and was still able to buy a gun. He'd managed to kill 4 students, 2 security guards, and a janitor. It was by far the most traumatic experience of my entire life.